Jenna Dawson. A little frustration taken out on the rim.
We didn't come out with the right mindset tonight. Like I said, we lacked the energy we needed.
Welcome to Omaha. Our CBS Sports Network triple header continues with Big East action between St. John's and Creighton. Alexander the lob and Kalkbrenner the finish. And that'll do it. Blue Jays put 104 on the board tonight, and they roll over St. John's.
You never know what you're going to get after an 8-day break. I thought our preparation was really good, especially our scout team. The look that they gave us in particular on Monday, I think opened our eyes to what we were going to see with St. John's, and I thought our preparation yesterday was better, and that was indicative of the way we played today.
Coffee and cream in the morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. He's Damon Benning. I'm Andrew Rogers. Happy to have you with us on this Thursday morning, live from the H&H Chevrolet stage at Hail Varsity Club, 590 ESPN Omaha, 1480 ESPN Lincoln. We're live on Twitter. We're live on YouTube. And I'd like to say good morning to kick things off here, because it was a good morning for Creighton fans out there. If you were a Husker fan attending the game at Pinnacle Bank Arena last night, that one was a tough one to swallow, tough one to watch.
Yeah, two different discussions, I think, for a couple different reasons. I guess, are we starting with Creighton?
Let's start with Creighton.
Let's start with Creighton, because they did put a Ben Franklin on the Johnnies last
Second
night.
time this year.
Yeah, Coach Anderson, it's an interesting team, right? You think they're going to be good. I think some folks in college basketball want the Johnnies to be good. They're just not.
Defensively, they're supposed to be good.
Yeah, and Creighton's done a number on them, and continues to kind of do so. I think just their ability to get any sort of looks they want to, whenever they want to. Then they got into transition, and you let that team get rolling, and it gets circusy. I mean, we saw it last night. It was like trick shot central, and
were they ever going to defend Kalkbrenner on the lob?
I mean, it's just weird. I don't know if that's a team that likes to always to ice ball screens and just couldn't figure out drop coverage or what. But, I mean, you let Creighton shoot 57%, 37% behind the arc. They went to the foul line 21 times. It's just too good of an offense.
Confidence.
I mean, I didn't recognize what was going on, but after the layoff, you have to be encouraged, and this is the stretch that I look to.
I don't even recognize what
with three out of the four of these next four at home. Creighton has a chance to get a little more cushion for the pushing, while the rest of the Big East still tries to figure it out. In particular, I mean, maybe UConn isn't very good.
Where did they go?
I still think it's their backcourt. They just can't find consistency with the guard play. Xavier jumped all over them, and really didn't look back. I know UConn made the late rally, but I mean, Xavier basically, would they start out 9-0?
Mm-hmm. Something like that.
I mean, it was something like that, and they trailed they were ahead the entire game. So I guess maybe you look at Marquette. They seem to have Creighton's number right now. Offensively, their efficiency is the best in the country. You look at the metrics. Creighton handled Providence. You're not going to expect much, or do you? Villanova's not very good. I think health is an issue for them. Who's next? Do you trust Seton Hall?
No,
I don't.
I don't trust Seton Hall. I don't trust Providence.
Providence can't score enough, I don't think, for Creighton.
I'll tell you what, too. Creighton is in a great spot. We talked to John Fanta on Tuesday, and he said, buy in now before Creighton gets going again. Why did he say that? Well, it's because based on what he was seeing with the total outlook of the Big East, Creighton was the second or third best team, but they're not resting in that position right now. Don't be shocked if Greg McDermott wins his Big East championship this year.
He thought long and hard about that too, didn't he? He says, I have a gut feeling that even though I think we kind of arrived, or he arrived at, he felt like Marquette was probably the best team in the Big East, right?
And you've been saying that for a month.
Well, I
now.
don't know about best. Don't give me that credit. I'd like to take it. I just felt like they looked like they had the ingredients to be really good.
I think if we went back and looked at your tweet, it insinuated something completely different.
I mean, maybe.
Take credit for it.
Because I don't know if I thought that real time, like, gosh, are they going to be the best? I just was like, man, they're pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they just have a lot.
They weren't getting credit either at that time.
They just have, because they had the same guys back, right? They're doing it in an unconventional manner. The story, and I wanted to see if we could go back and post it, because with the Hurrdat, I think we lost the back end of the Marquette story that John Fanta was talking about with Shaka Smart, just going back to development, putting together his staff, hiring a G League guy, just the whole story, the retreat that they went on where Shaka Smart said 90% of the discussion was led by the players, which I think is kind of how you have to do it. I mean, most coaches will tell you the good teams are player led.
Yeah, the ones that you sit back and relax.
Yeah, it's the less coaching of culture you have to do in the more football or basketball or whatever it is sport that you're coaching.
Let them coach themselves, and you guide them to
the better off your team's going to be.
The right lane.
So I just look at the way that they're playing, and they still have to come. They still have the last third of the Big East season to play, but Creighton's just got a stretch on their schedule where I think they can make some hay, and it will remind people of what they fell in love with in the preseason. Now,
and in Maui.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a team. This is what that game reminded me of. This team in Maui, the performance in Maui, where all 5 guys contributed and scored, where their experience outweighed everything else on the floor. And let's not forget, once the Maui trip was concluded and Kalkbrenner went out with sickness, that's when it kind of spiraled downhill. But now as we're starting to pick back up in Big East play, you remember that big guy down low that can not only score, but can guard.
And he only missed 1 field goal last night, right?
And that's how it works with him.
So they had 3 bench guys that got into double digits in terms of minutes played: King, Farabello, and Sharif Mitchell. I think 13, 17, and 11, respectively, in terms of minutes. Can you do that? And if you have to win 3 games in whatever it's going to be, 5 days, assuming they're going to get a quality seed. But I think this is the stretch on the schedule, and I get it. Coach speak. But it's real. 1 game at a time. Because you stub your toe in one of these next 3, then all of a sudden it's like, we just can't catch momentum. I mean, I think you had to go 4-0, especially, like I said, with 3 of them at home. They may just be getting started.
Balanced scoring, good ball control, solid
balanced
defense,
scoring,
which all led to that word I used just about 2 minutes ago, confidence. They are a confident group right now. After an 8-day break, sometimes you wonder if a team will come out flat. And this team had no inkling of doing that. Now, St. John's hung around early on in this basketball game, but Creighton had their way with this team. Offensive board after offensive board, contesting without fouling on defense. That is a crucial point to add, because that is one of the best parts to Creighton's game, in my opinion.
Now, you did allow 11 offensive rebounds with 11 second chance points. Okay. I mean, if we're going to get
really critical,
nitpicky, but I think you're okay with St. John's shooting 46%.
And when did some of those offensive boards come? And I don't know if
second half of the second half,
right, when the bench is in.
Yeah. So,
and frankly, let's talk about the bench for a second. By night's end, Creighton's bench was going toe to toe with St. John's starters.
Yeah. Which it's what I was saying. You got three guys that came off the bench, got to double digits in minutes. Can you build on that? Because I think you're gonna we've seen enough now, right? You're convinced that you need more than just the 5. I mean, depth is kind of only overrated unless you get into foul trouble. But I just think you need another punch or 2 coming off the bench, and we'll see what happens.
Overrated in games, underrated in practice. Nonetheless, Creighton.
And Mason Miller got to double digits too. He got to 11 minutes.
And how about
That's 4.
How about Yates?
That's well, he's kind of been creeping in, right?
Shoot 'em.
Remember during the kind of the lull, and everybody was like, "Wow, Mac is pushing the Yates button," right?
4 minutes. He played 4 minutes, and he cashed 3 threes.
Efficient.
Hey, they leave you hungry for more. Speaking of hungry, let's get to our poll question today, halfway through this segment, and then we'll talk a little Nebraska basketball. Out of the 4, if you were DoorDashing fast food to a college basketball game, what's your craving? Is it McDonald's, Taco Bell, Chick-fil-A, or Popeyes? You can go to Hail Varsity Radio and vote. Why is this the poll question today, DB? Well, I'm happy you asked, because in last night's Loyola Chicago basketball game, were they playing Duquesne?
Yeah.
I can't remember who they were playing.
That was Duquesne.
Duquesne.
Yes.
Onto the floor comes an Uber Eats
I didn't
driver,
see this real time.
a DoorDasher. But you know what strikes me as what put me in complete shock, I should say.
Does he appear to not know that a game was going on?
Well, not only that, but so you DoorDash to the game, right? Whoever DoorDash to the game.
Yeah,
this guy has to get into the game.
Yeah.
So do you have to buy a ticket? Like, do you have to go to the ticket window, get a $5 ticket?
I can't imagine he's doing that. But
you
how do you get in?
And then how do you get courtside?
Yeah.
Like, how do you get onto
walked on the
onto
floor.
the tunnel?
Yeah.
Where did you come from? Like, you can't just go down the bleachers.
Think security's getting a talking to?
Right. And nobody stops you. Let alone this guy enters play. He comes to the corner where the ball is being passed down low, and the ref is waving him off, and he's holding his McDonald's bag or whatever it was, his Uber Eats order for somebody.
He is doing some good things. And by the way, in just year 2, is it time to have some speaks about Drew Valentine at Loyola Chicago? Not a good basketball program right now since the departure of Porter Moser. And it's just interesting.
Is Sister Jean still around?
Yeah, I think that would have been like a story. That would have been like a front page breaking news story.
Guess how old Sister Jean is?
Give me plus or minus a year or 2.
Yeah, I'll give you plus or minus a year or 2.
94.
She's 103.
Whoa. Century mark for Sister Jean.
103.
Sister Jean.
1919
has come.
I think that's Christian.
Oh, my bad. Sorry about that. This is one of those names, man. I don't know. Because I saw, and it was just interesting, because I saw St. Thomas at the Prep Westside game. You don't see very many 6'6", 6'7" striking guys like this, just kind of hanging out. And it just got me thinking, like, what is the state of Loyola Chicago's program right now? But that's kind of a side moment. But can I get back to the poll question?
Yeah, go ahead.
We had McDonald's, Chick-fil-A,
Taco Bell, and Popeyes.
Wow, I think you probably picked the 4 most. I would imagine, because they're all not just regional. Chick-fil-A's are everywhere.
Right.
Taco Bell's, I don't know about the Southwest. They have Taco Bells in the Southwest. They have their other littles.
I feel like that's just like a drunk college kid's joint.
Okay.
So that's why
we know
I threw
McDonald's
that in.
is a national brand. Taco Bell's a national brand. And Popeyes national?
You know,
I don't remember seeing very many Popeyes in Montana, but I was only there twice.
You know, I just realized that I put 2 chicken places on here, Popeyes and Chick-fil-A.
Oh, that's okay. So I know mine for sure of those 4. It's not even
close.
Not even close.
Yeah,
Did you say a pizza place?
No. Are you would you know any fast food pizza places?
Like Domino's. I mean,
Is that fast food or carry?
Hey, where's your jam, Shane?
The guy that lives below me in the apartment below me, every single day he DoorDashes or whatever it is, and he gets Domino's every
Well, you
day.
can DoorDash Olive Garden.
Domino's is pretty cheap.
It is cheap pizza because you can get the 2 for $5.99.
The last 2 times Zoe's needed a babysitter for an extended period of time, Domino's has been the go-to for the babysitter.
Just because that's what the babysitter chose, or that's what Zoe wanted?
Zoe wouldn't pick. I'm the babysitter. The babysitter.
Domino's?
Yeah.
If I knew you were buying, we're catering Charleston's.
Hey, what's on? Would you like salmon delivered? They have fantastic. That's what I would get at Charleston.
I don't know if I would want
People
my
yap
fish,
about the bread,
like sitting in a container and then making its way to me.
See, your boy. See, I pick restaurants based on how well their food travels, because not a lot of times I like to sit in there.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I love Firebirds. No endorsement opportunities, but their food, because everybody's kind of up their to-go containers. It's all about the container.
It is. Actually, it is. Because depending on how much the meal sweats in that container, it can kill it completely.
Yeah, see, your
or
boy,
it can thrive.
Your boy doesn't get things like fries and tater tots, even though I love tots. But that can like steam the whole.
Thank goodness for an air fryer.
Hey, but man.
Because if your fries get soggy on the way there.
Thank goodness for my mom and the ninja she got me. Listen, so you know what people have started doing in their containers is they have the little flap that opens. It's just a little itty bitty. It's like a sweat flap in the plastic container. Have you noticed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's what I use, because I have a smoking gun now where you can smoke your food with just the little gun.
That's sweet.
So I was trying to figure it out. And a lot of people have like the little glass lids and stuff where you put the deal in so the smoke can't escape. I use the plastic container for
Leave it to you.
Micah and I just did it the other night. I hit the shrimp with a little smoke before we seared them in the skillet because he likes to cook. He held the tube for. I'll show you on Twitter. I don't know if he wants me to put him on Twitter, but
put him on blast.
Do that.
Chef Micah.
No, he does he calls him. His nickname is Breeze. He calls himself Chef Boyar Breeze. Hey, I gotta say,
at least he's clever.
Listen, I told you they're polar opposites, and I think he much enjoys talking to his older sister than he does Caleb, because when they go back and forth, it gets a little dicey. Because Mike is extremely smart, and Caleb is Maya's just more patient. Okay?
Right.
So we're in the car yesterday, and we hadn't talked about the Prep Westside game since. We didn't talk about it really. So I pick him up from school. They have early dismissal. This is my 12-year-old. And I told him we were going to call him. And he know what he said? You need mornings with Micah. This kid. We're going to call. We'll impromptu call him tomorrow morning. You watch. He's something else. So he gets in the car.
I'm writing this down first off.
Listen,
this is happening.
He gets in the car. He says, hey, little late. My basketball bag got jammed in my locker. Okay, it's fine. It's not late at all. So he comes out and he gets in the car and he goes, so, I'm dead dog serious. So, thoughts on the game last night? I go, well, I'm not super happy, this, and this. I said, I'd like to have been a fly on the wall in that film session. And he goes, Dad, Josh Lutke is the best coach in the state. I go, what? He goes, he's tapping my arm. Low key, Dad. Again, haven't seen him all day. This is what he started. Dad, low key, he's tapping my arm. Yeah, Micah? He was on that offensive and defensive substitution game all game. I mean, he knew what he was trying to do. I'm like, hey, I'm guessing you haven't talked to your brother, because he wouldn't want to hear any of this, right? He goes, no, that's why I'd rather just talk to Maya about it. I was like, wow. Get out of the car. But anyway, mornings with Micah would be because that's how he thinks.
So we can just surprise him at any moment.
Any moment.
And he's ready.
He might be in the car now. I'm telling you. It's just unbelievable. I take him to his training session, and it's on the brain. I take him to his training session, and he's gonna be pretty okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's warming up. He's supposed to be lifting. It's not even basketball. So he's dribbling out there or doing something. And his trainer asks him, he says, hey, so are you West Side bound too? Micah goes, well, that depends. Huh?
On what?
So I know there's and so I was thinking, because
is he going to play for the best coach in the state?
His mom lives close to Westview, and I know he likes Coach Runco. So I was thinking, okay, West Side or Westview. He says, well, what if I want to go to prep? I was like, oh, boy.
Yes.
And leave it to him. I mean, it's just, but full disclosure, like our family likes Josh. So it's like, I get it. Right. And I just was with him. Well, I wasn't with him. He was with his staff. I saw him out on Friday night, but certainly not going to be the prep recruitment hour. But I just, that's just how he thinks. We didn't argue. We got into it last night because we were talking about Larry Bird. I told you he's a big Larry Bird guy. He Googled his stats. And I said, I just was telling Andrew, he only played, God is my witness.
What, 10 full seasons?
10 full seasons. He goes, yeah, and 30% of those, he was an MVP.
And you're like, oh.
I'm like, this little dude is something else.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Like, he knows. And I told you yesterday, I was like, how about going back to back to back with MVPs? Right? His stats, because we were talking about Hall of Fame stats,
right?
And why baseball is so staunch on metrics when other sports don't seem to be near as numbers driven.
Right.
I mean, Lynn Swann was in it. Took Art Monk 88 years, right? I mean, it's like Art Monk has significantly better stats. Lynn Swann got in first, right? Signature moments. Whatever.
And Art Monk, he was the NFL all-time leading receiver for quite a while before Jerry Rice.
Yeah, just weird, right?
And Steve Largent.
Just weird.
We'll try to get into more of that later on.
Sorry, Nebraska basketball. I apologize.
The show.
It's just what I'm dealing with.
Right. Which I love. I mean, frankly,
he's very sports savvy.
We'll touch on Nebraska basketball in the next segment. We'll also touch on a let's just say
By the way,
debate.
I'm taking Popeyes.
A debate going on Twitter regarding Husker football and the situation that they're in prior to the season. Is it one thing or is it the other? If you've been following it along on Twitter, we'll touch on that.
And it started amongst school. It started with a guy that I follow on Twitter. He's a fan. Jim in Minnesota was going back and forth with Scott Docterman. Then Sip has his kind of deal, and he calls it a reset. Then all of a sudden, it's like, and I normally don't interject. I try not to interject myself, but it's such a fascinating discussion because at the end of the day, I mean, and we'll get into it.
Well, and it's great because perspectives go one way.
And it matters on how you view the upcoming season.
Brandon Vogel at 7:45. We'll talk to Cynthia Frelund, analytics expert for NFL Network, right at the top of the hour at 8. We'll talk more about Hall of Fame baseline numbers if we can get into that. And then we end the show, as we always do on a Thursday, with Brian Edwards. We'll talk about the best plays of the weekend. But again, your poll question, if you're door dashing to a college basketball game, what fast food are you craving? Is it McDonald's, Taco Bell, Chick-fil-A, Popeyes? We'll get to those results at the end of the show. Coming up next, we'll talk reset or rebuild and a little Nebraska basketball. What is the position of Nebraska football right now? What do you think? Give us a call, 888-638-4876. That's next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 5 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Hey, back with you on Coffee and Cream in the Morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. Damon Benning, Andrew Rogers, live from the H&H Chevrolet stage at Hail Varsity Club. We'll get into the reset, rebuild conversation in a moment, but first I want to go to the phone lines. We'll take line one. Michigan Lance, you're on the show. Michigan Lance, what's up, man? How you doing, Lance?
Lance, going. Shane, get your guy. Get your guy, man.
I thought he was there. He said he'd be ready.
Lance, you with us? All right, let's go to line two.
We'll take line two, Shaner. Out of breath, Brian with us on the show. Brian, welcome to the show. Brian, what's up, man?
Who's running?
Are we sure we're potted up?
Shane, who's running the phones?
That's weird.
Help us out here, Shane. Because they're both still there, right?
Well, Brian is.
Well, what happened to Michigan Lance?
Did he try to call back?
I don't know. Shane's talking.
All right, we'll change gears. Here come the phones. I don't know if anybody can hear those in the background.
Shane, we ready to go with B? Hail Varsity Radio.
Varsity Radio.
Hail Varsity Radio's amateur hour. I mean, sometimes it's technical difficulties.
Hey, you know what?
Hey, by the way, with Nebraska basketball, are you to the point now where you feel bad?
For the team,
Yeah.
yes. I just think that they were hit with unfortunate circumstances, and I know every team has to battle through adversity, and I don't want to take that away from teams that do still find a way to have great success when things don't go their way. But in Nebraska's case, they had 5 guys on the regular. Those were the 5 guys that you relied on each and every game. Then when you lose one, it's easy to replace, right? They can play the fill-in game with Kisei. They can play the fill-in game with players that come off the bench. But now you're down 2, and you're down your 2 best defenders to add to that. They kind of got hit by a car. And I don't know if they can get picked back up or not.
You want dueling fan perspectives?
Go.
Last night I tweeted out, I'm obviously following along on television, and I'm looking at Stats Broadcast because Stat Broadcast gives you real-time numbers, and I can get in depth, right? So I just tweeted out, just kind of innocuous. I was like, yeah, the halftime stats on the surface look not too bad, right? Not as bad as the last 3 minutes or 4 minutes of that
So you
half
look
went.
away from the box score.
Yeah, and so then I looked at the 6-1 offensive rebounds, and it yielded 14-2 second chance points, right? Like that's a lot,
right?
And so on Twitter, past your bedtime, he's funny. He goes, not many more wins in store at this point. I tweeted back. I said that would be a shame because it wouldn't be indicative of the job that I think he's done. That's my opinion because I think Coach Hoiberg's done a fantastic job. He says, agreed. Missing 2 starters allows other teams to do whatever it needs to neutralize Walker, and then there's no way and you can keep up for 40 minutes relying on others to make shots. So Redcast Rob, right? Good.
One of our guys?
Yeah, one of our guys comes back in and says, I get the injuries are part of it, but come on. People have to be running out of excuses at some point, right? It's year 4. Past your bedtime. He says, if you're really watching and know basketball, you'd understand kind of the low blow shot, right? Passive aggressive. Hey, you're a ding dong. You don't get it. Even though Redcast Rob is pretty in tune. He said, this is just par for NU Hoops fans. Just keep those popcorn lines short. Okay. Redcast.
How long is this thread?
That's not too long because the point that I want to make is he says, I'm really watching and I do understand. That doesn't mean that fans don't deserve better. This program's ability to maintain mediocrity is the most impressive part of the program, which is you have to be able to understand both those vantage points, right?
Sure.
Right. Because the diehard and past your bedtime is what I would call he's a long time suffering Nebraska basketball fan. So he may be looking at incremental progress, actually development, actual improving. That's the micro. From the macro, it's why can't this program win? Right? Just because at some point you tune out into what the actual real reasons may be, and just know that for whatever the reason, in X amount of years of having a basketball program, you have yet to win a March game, right? So it's like, I won't say NCAA tournament game, right? Not NIT or CBI or CBA or CBT or
A game.
Any couple of those don't even exist anymore.
Right.
And CBA never existed unless you're talking about collective bargaining agreement. I just say
Are we not?
No. Well, it's just weird how the sports are viewed through such different prisms. Right? Because meanwhile, in football, at the same time, you're having rebuild versus reload arguments. Basketball, it's, hey, we're getting better. No, we're not. It's too many excuses. It's just like relative to the sport and the lens, I kind of feel like the goalpost move. That's why you have to set what the baseline is, at least in my opinion, to even entertain the discussion.
Sam Griesel scoring 8, Derek Walker scoring 7. You won't win games doing that.
No, and Griesel's response in the post game that we played in the open. Shane, do you still have Griesel's comments post game that we used in the open?
I can find it here.
Because what Sam said lends itself more to Redcast Rob than it does past not yours, bedtime. I don't even know if he wants me to use his real name. That's who he is on Twitter. But anyway, because he's not making excuses. He's saying, hey, man, we need to come out with more energy. Like, we just weren't vibing tonight.
I have it.
Play that again. Play what Sam Griesel said on Nebraska starting this basketball game.
We didn't come out with the right mindset tonight. Like I said, we lacked the energy we needed.
Welcome to Omaha.
Well, I'll tell you what, when you talk about lacking energy, yeah, that's a problem for all teams, though, whether you have your starting five out there or not. Teams come out there where they're either amped up, juiced up for the game, or they're not. This team can't afford any sort of mistake at this point in the season. They're at a time to where they've competed in games and won games that people did not expect them to win, and they're still on the bubble of being a team that could compete in the Big Ten tournament, right? Could be a team that gets and plays deep into March, but they don't have the legs right now for either of those
At
things.
what point last night were you thinking this is fool's gold? They took the lead at 25-22.
Well,
then
I knew
proceeded
Keesey
to
was
let
going to cool. He wasn't going to keep hitting shots.
Yeah.
And he was the only one hitting shots.
My guy too, he DM'd me. I felt like he'd hit a three, and my guy goes, "Hey, looks like we got good Keesey tonight." I was like, give it a sec, right? Like, it's hard for him to I think maintain in spurts, and that's right when he took the kind of the flailing shot in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's trying to draw the foul. And then it was all downhill from there. And all of a sudden you look up and it's 32-25. You're like, wait, the 10-0 run?
Three after three after three. And I'll tell you, with Tominaga, if he didn't shoot the ball as well as he did, this team would have been down 40.
Let me just ask you something. Why does Nebraska basketball always have those guys that are having or asked to do more than they normally would in other programs? Isn't that weird? I don't expect you to have a patented answer, but it just seems like guys get exposed having to be on the floor for so long when they wouldn't be at other places.
Right.
And it's not just a Keesey thing, but I'm just saying it's like it just seems year after year. Now, and let's not act like he didn't go 9 of 17 either. Right?
I'd say in other programs too, other players aren't relied on as much to do that.
Yeah.
It seems like at Nebraska, if you are on this team, you play into your strength, and Keesey's strength is shooting the basketball. He's a scorer.
So normally, if you don't pay attention to the box score, would you take Nebraska shooting 47% from the floor?
Yes.
You'd take them shooting 36% from three, too.
Mm-hmm.
It's
defensively, it just wasn't there. Plus, when you look at Northwestern, Ty Berry going off was kind of like Tominaga going off.
Yeah.
But then Nebraska doesn't have another person to go off to match Northwestern. And that's the problem.
They forced 15 turnovers. And I think 9 were live ball, but you committed 16. So that's why I think the exchange that I was seeing between Nebraska, like I was kind of, and I try not, I was accused once, like 15 years ago, of being milquetoast, and I was like, yeah, that's never happening again. I'm having strong opinions. I'm not going to be a waffler. Totally kidding. But I can see both sides of the discussion.
Right.
Because Coach Hoiberg is coached and earned better than the record, but at some point you are what your record says you are. And he's not going to make excuses, which could be the segue for what we'd want to get into with rebuilds versus resets versus rules of engagement, because he's not going to make excuses either. But he coined the phrase, AR. That soft stuff, the rebuild, that was last year.
We'll get into that more at the 8 o'clock hour. We apologize for not doing that, but we went down a rabbit hole of Nebraska basketball. Brian couldn't get to you. I apologize there as well, but we have Brandon Vogel next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hale Varsity Radio.
Hey, welcome back to the show. Glad to have you with us. 590 ESPN Omaha, 1480 ESPN Lincoln, live on Twitter, live on YouTube. It's Coffee and Cream in the morning on Hale Varsity Radio. Damon Benning, Andrew Rogers, live from the H&H Chevrolet stage at Hale Varsity Club. And at this time, let's welcome in our good friend, Brandon Vogel. He's, gosh, do you live in Tennessee, Brandon? I always forget. You live there? Is that where you live?
I do, Chattanooga,
Tennessee. So he's out on the eastern side of us. Is it warmer in Tennessee right now?
It is probably. I haven't checked the temperature in Omaha at the moment, but it's cold for here. It's going to get up to 42 today, so I'm not going to complain.
He said up to 42.
I know, darn.
Hey, we woke up below wind chill B, maybe high at 23 today. We're going to get some baby flurries tonight and a little bit of a snow dumping on Saturday, man. So God bless the Midwest.
Indeed. I've been here about 10 years now, and I think I've used my snow shovel once, not to rub it in. But
Oh, good. Well, that's helpful. That's great to know.
So, Brandon, our fellow media, some of our fellow brethren in the media have been having some interesting back and forth, right? I saw one of our media folks going back and forth with Scott Docterman, then kind of Steve Sipple weighed in on his vantage point, which was kind of independent but congruent with the discussion in terms of where we are. Doc said, hey, Nebraska's starting from scratch. We was predicting the Big Ten West, and that got all sorts of pushback. And Sip comes out with a little bit of a piece, and he calls it a reset, not a rebuild. How much does your frame of reference and Sip was interesting, as I was kind of texting back and forth with him, and his thing is he's talking about from the player standpoint, right? Like he doesn't want to be disrespectful to the players. Is it a player angle? Is it a coaching experience angle, or is it a program angle, considering where Nebraska's been, with what word you use to describe Rule in year one when he said last year was part of the reset? Those were his words.
Yeah, and that's kind of what my thought was. There is, I don't think anything I've heard from Rule to this point indicates that, hey, this is similar to Temple, similar to year one at Baylor. Like, we got to tear this thing all the way down to build it back up. I haven't gotten that sense from him. And, you know, maybe a coach doesn't come right out and say that in his first month and a half on the job. Fair point. I think the difference between, you know, a reset or a rebuild probably depends on how zoomed out you are. So if you're, you know, like I think Steve Sipple, like you alluded to, if he's looking at this from a player's angle, or, you know, if that's your primary point of view, yeah, it's tough to say like, hey guys, hey Luke Reimer, appreciate everything you've done, but no expectations this year because we've got to like totally rebuild this thing. So go out there and have fun. That's tough, a tough message. If you zoom out and if you're looking at it from a probably program wide angle, I could see why you'd say that. If you just look from afar at Nebraska's results, yeah, they've got a long way to go. I personally come down, like, I don't view this as kind of the hard rebuild that, say, a program like Colorado might need based on their previous season. Nebraska, despite the record, which everyone knows was nowhere near where anyone wanted it, I don't think Nebraska ever quite fell that far in terms of how often it was in games and how close it actually was.
But do you say that because Matt Rule has done such a good job throughout his 2 months at Nebraska? Like, because you had said, like, it doesn't feel that way.
Or is it his track record?
Or
You
is
said
it-
that
yeah,
off
or
air,
is
and I
it
was like,
his
oh,
track
that's a
record,
good point.
that makes you think like that.
Yeah, it's more, I think both of those factors are important. It's more kind of looking at Nebraska was a team that consistently, you know, if you get into the power rankings, which I know is a whole like other can of worms, but it's something I put some stock into and look at. Like, they were always a team that was better than its ranking. And for a while, you can kind of ride that wave and say, well, it wasn't quite as bad as it looked. Next year, things should progress to the mean, so to speak. And it just never did. And that becomes tricky because it's like, how long do you wait for, you know, these results that you could realistically expect to come for just a random team? So that's kind of Nebraska's standpoint, in my view. You know, retweeted something from Bill Connolly at ESPN this morning about Nebraska's going to rank pretty well in his weighted returning production. And you look down the roster, you know, you're losing Trey Palmer. That's like almost half your receiving yards, but on offense, that's the biggest one. Defensively, I think 5 of top 10 tacklers are back. Plus, you're going to return that secondary, which I think is the most important place to be experienced on defense.
Yeah, it's interesting, and from the folks on 3 and Sipple and those guys were talking about experience and where the defense would have ranked top 30 nationally under when Coach Bush took over, almost as if to substantiate and validate the point of rebuild versus reset. Andrew and I were talking 2 weeks ago. Seems like it's come up a lot now. Yeah, we agree. The secondary is the strength. It probably has the most proven playmakers, but Nebraska hasn't been winning games. So how do you rectify all production being good production versus, okay, well, how is this yielding results?
That's the thing. And I mean, I think, you know, we can talk rebuild, we can talk reset. Like, in my mind, when I look at Nebraska, that's the key issue to solve for. It's like, where was the break in the chain here? Why didn't this kind of follow, you know, what you would expect in a more linear fashion when looking at college football as a whole? Like, I don't care if we're talking about Tulsa or the University of Tennessee. You can look at return in production and what it has meant in the past and come up with reasonable projections. And Nebraska just if you have that kind of trend line, always ended up too far above or more often below it for whatever reason. So I look at this as, I mean, it's not an easy problem to solve, but it's a clear problem to identify. And I think even the offensive line, you mentioned the secondary, offensive line might be a good one too. Last year, Nebraska returned a ton of starts. Now they're going to return a ton of starts again. Were they good starts? Were they the starts that you needed? And then you can look at the results and say, well, pretty clearly they weren't the starts they needed. So what do you do with that?
We're talking to Brandon Vogel, managing editor for Hail Varsity. Follow him on Twitter at Brandon L. Vogel. Looking at the commitment list here, Brandon, as it keeps growing for Nebraska. Since we last talked, Nebraska secured another offensive lineman, a pair of wide receivers, some tight ends. My question to you is there ever too many? Can you ever have too many guys? We talked about scholarship numbers a little bit last week, but is there ever a time where one more is one too many?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I don't think I would put up a hard limit at this stage in kind of a coaching transition. Like it's the first time this staff has gone through and had access to the portal at the college level, of course. So it kind of, to me, it seems like cast a wide net right now. I do think it comes down. I think as we get further along in this new regime at Nebraska, roster size is an interesting discussion. Nebraska is always right around 150, which is the most in the Big Ten when you factor in walk-on. And I do think, we can think back to Nebraska in the past and understand the advantage that had in a kind of different phase of the game. Now, how big do you have to get before it becomes hard to devote the individual attention you need? And also individual attention, I think, is something that's really important to Matt Rule. So that's something I'll be interested to see as we continue on.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I just look at like the scholarship distributions kind of as it sits, and in my head, I could say, I could see 3 wide receivers leaving. I could see 2 linebackers leaving. I could see 3 DBs leaving. Like, I can kind of in my head make some educated guesses, because don't you get the sense no functional quality programs, to my knowledge, have made a living with NIL and keeping guys on scholarship? I don't even think that's on the table. Number one, it's a bad business because it's not the NIL model. And number two, coaches don't want to manage extreme numbers. Nebraska will get to the number. I think we're fretting over nothing.
Yeah, I think so too. Nebraska to this point has had, I think, surprisingly few departures in the transfer portal, or at least less than I expected given a coaching transition. That said, I think when the May window opens, you'll see a little bit closer to what might be typical. It's interesting. You brought it up and it kind of framed it in a good way, I think, with NIL and the transfer portal as kind of the two new things available to college football players. I think you're right. Like the evidence of a player being like, well, I'm not playing, but I'm going to stay here because the NIL is really good. It isn't there. So of those two things, NIL or the ability to transfer and start again, which is carrying more weight, I think at this point you have to say it's still playing time. It's still a chance to get on the field.
Vogel, we appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much for joining the show this morning. We'll talk again next week.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, B.
That's Brandon Vogel, managing editor for Hail Varsity. Follow him on Twitter at Brandon L. Vogel. Something I thought about when we were just talking about a bunch of these commitments.
What's that, Drew?
And you were talking about how, you never know if you could lose 3 receivers here or there. How do you leave an everlasting impression on players to keep them there? Like, how is Matt Rule going about all of these recruiting talks and making you feel as a recruit, put yourself in the recruit's shoes, on knowing that you're going to be at Nebraska for 4 years?
Well, I can only tell you what I've heard him say and kind of how they've impacted our house. Mm-hmm. We need you. We want you. This is where we see you. It's an integral part of where we want to be. You fit in like this.
Is it the same thing with everybody, or is it always different?
If you're authentic, I think it is. Now, the words may change, but the message does not.
Cynthia Frelund up next. We're talking NFL right here on Coffee and Cream.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream on Hail Varsity Radio with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning.
I expect it to be a battle all the way through. Both the Cowboys and Eagles are both physical, talented teams who are really fast and have a lot of talent. So just like it was a battle this past week, I'm expecting that, if not more, this week. You know, them being in their home stadium, home crowd behind them, they're going to be juiced up, ready to go.
No, I haven't even thought about it. We're focused on this week, focused on the Chiefs. No, we're not playing for a Super Bowl this week, so got to get through this one.
And got to get those refunds sent out. It's Coffee and Cream in the morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. Damon Benning, Andrew Rogers. Top of the hour here on the show. Happy to have you with us. 590 ESPN Omaha, 1480 ESPN Lincoln, live on Twitter, live on YouTube. And happy to welcome in now a good friend, Cynthia Frelund, analytics expert for NFL Network. Cynthia, good morning. Uh-oh.
We are struggling with our phones this morning.
Phone lines aren't doing us any help this morning.
Oh, that's tough. I want to talk to the architect of game theory.
She is outstanding. She is so into stats. It makes me, it's like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah, and the reason it interests me, and I was just watching, you know, because that's my network of choice, because they specialize in just that sport as opposed to some other networks. And it's counterintuitive to kind of how I've always looked at sports as a competitor and a coach. Now, I know analytics has crept into coaching the last 10 years quite a bit, but it's the most reluctant sport, I think, in my opinion, to embrace analytics.
Well, and, it's great to have that perspective because for me, I never played the sport. So I always looked at the sport from a stat-driven angle. And so because of that, I like projections more than I can understand maybe what is actually happening, right? I use the stats to predict versus rather letting real-time things tell the story, if that makes sense.
And what's interesting too is how about how general managers and presidents and head coaches now try to have this symbiotic relationship based on who embraces it. You see it all the time in baseball, right? The guys that like to fill out the lineup card based on like Jim Leland and analytics. Can you imagine? No. Jim Leland is the guy that once cussed out Barry Bonds at Pirates spring training and said, this is his team. Can you imagine Jim Frelund getting a general manager? Did I say Leland?
You said Freeland for Cynthia.
Oh, Jim Leland turning and burning his cigarettes, embracing analytics in the front baseball office to set his lineups. There's no way. So somewhere where those worlds collide, I think as I watch it in sports, we've seen it dominate basketball. No more long twos, right? How efficient do you have to be in your 2-point pull-up game to off? How good do you have to be with Booker and DeMar DeRozan and Kawhi Leonard to offset either layups or threes, right? Like that's tough, and we see it in analytics all the time with other sports. Football, now where do we see it? The Nick Siriannis, the Brandon Staley's going for it, the Buffalo Bills. It's like they're playing the analytics game. There's a reason we've seen more 2-point conversions in the last 5 years.
So we weren't able to get Cynthia via the phone, but I'm told that we have Cynthia through StreamYard. Shaner, is she loaded up, ready to go?
In a second here.
Okay, great. So we'll get her there. So we will still be able to talk football with you. And then a little bit later on in this segment, we're going to go back to that reset, rebuild, what we were just talking about with Brandon Vogel, because I think I have a point that maybe Quaker-like. I may be.
Are you Puritan Quaker? Like what? Where are we going with
resting
this?
in the middle, and I don't lead one way.
We've got her here.
We've got her. She's in.
She won't be on video, but
totally fine.
That's great.
Cynthia, good morning. Can you hear us? Can you hear us, Cynthia?
We're gonna pot her up, I think, here in a minute.
It is potted up.
How did we just talk to Brandon in Nashville
and not get Cynthia now?
Wow, I think Shane knows that I'm curious to have this analytics in the NFL discussion.
I'm curious.
Well, I always like to learn, and we've been dying to get her on. Wouldn't that?
I've been asking for 2 weeks.
I know. Shane, give the man what he asks, okay? Can he just talk to Cynthia? Wow, you literally just said you've been asking for 2 weeks, you baby.
I've been asking Shane for 2 weeks. Like, let's get Cynthia on, man.
How about when he told you yesterday that he got her, and you're like, yes!
I was stoked. I was so happy.
You child.
I'm such a kid.
But now your buzz is momentarily delayed.
It's more heartbreak.
Is it?
Yeah.
Are you gonna be all right? You seem very hurt right now.
I think we're just gonna have to pass today till we get
things figured out.
Yeah.
Come on, Shane.
How'd we get B Vogues?
That I don't know, because he was on video. Did that change it?
I don't know. I mean, where's Sasha Durkin when you need her?
Oh, man, like that's a low blow.
Okay, we got to recalibrate. Let's
tie it back all together.
We got to refocus. Rebuild as a Puritan and a Quaker.
We need to rebuild this show right now. Or do we reset it?
I'm on my steel cut.
All right, try her once more.
Oh, all right, we're trying again. Cynthia.
Just once more.
I can hear you now.
Yeah,
let's go. Game changer.
Hey, thanks for joining us, Cynthia.
Absolutely. How are you guys doing?
I appreciate the patience. That's the thing.
Yeah,
How
that's
about
huge.
that? Thank you. Thank you.
We're good. We're good. And hey, being as stat driven as you are, because I want to get right into this now. It's been teasing me. It's been hanging over me.
2 weeks, Cynthia.
Being as stat driven as you are, I'd like to start with your projections. The teams out of the AFC give you the most confidence to win it all. But I think even more surprising is seeing the Eagles hold up the rear out of the 4 remaining teams. What gives you that inclination?
It's really interesting. I was a little surprised about that too when I was looking at everything as it, I put it's a very unbiased model, so I put the information in and that's what came out. But it is a very close game between the Niners and the Eagles. So when I'm looking at the Eagles and their specific team, and they have been the best at like fourth down decisions, Jalen Hurts is the best against zone defense, etc. But there's a couple of areas where like if things get off the rails, for example, like like if you need your running backs to pick up a blitz or something happens and you're playing from behind, they're not as well equipped as some of the other teams. So if things don't go well, if that read option doesn't work, if the run game stops being effective for their offense, we haven't really seen them dig themselves out of a lot of holes, which means there's a bit of uncertainty there, which could be good, but also could be bad.
Yeah, I'm curious. I want to back up whether I'm watching game theory or the projections. I hear you say things like putting in numbers. Coach for a long time, played even longer. And when I hear analytics in the NFL, I think of the major sports. It's been the last to really embrace analytics. Now we've seen this new age of the McVays and the Shanahans and the McDermotts and the Siriannis, folks that really have kind of embraced analytics. Why do you think the NFL was maybe slow is not the word? Why was there such reluctance and such a data-driven deal to embrace analytics?
That's a great question. I think part of it is that you have 11 moving pieces on each side of the ball in every snap, and there is a lot of patience involved in creating like when I'm modeling, I have to ask former players and coaches to vet what I'm doing so that you don't want the machine to tell you everything. You want it to be programmed in a way that's what would a human do. You just want it to be faster. You don't want it to be different. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
you're not trying to take the element out of it. You just and when you're coaching, you watch 4 weeks of film prior to a game. Well, this way you can watch every single time that Jalen Hurts is faced a what looked like cover 2 ahead of the snap, but rotated to single high after. So, whatever. You can watch that. You can catalog that extremely quickly, whereas that would have taken you a day before. Now it takes you like 3 seconds, right? So the reality is it just took a lot of patience to get there, and there's so many moving pieces on every snap that it's just so hard to get to.
All right, so Andrew and I got in not a knockdown, drag out, a very good discussion on Monday I think we kind of ended on the same side. We were talking about this Burrow versus Mahomes thing, Mahomes' health, the 4 in a row. And I said, at the end of the day, why do I like the Chiefs? Well, I'm going to take Andy Reid, the due diligence that I think will happen in this with game planning, and a healthier Mahomes at home that's actually got a legitimate chip on his shoulder versus the manufactured chips like we sometimes hear from Chiefs fans.
Mm-hmm.
Is that smart to factor that in? Or should I just be like, would you be like, hey, DB, keep your emotions out of it? I understand. This is what the data says. Because it seems to me I want to lean towards intangibles. Is that what gets us in trouble?
I mean, it depends, right? We always overcorrect, right? Last week, I think about it with this Bengals O-line. Last week, we're like, they're toast. There's 3 O-linemen gone, and the Bills are just gonna, the Bills are just gonna kill them, and blah 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 blah, right? And then now it's like, oh, they don't even need their starting O-linemen. They're so we go too far. The pendulum swings too far. So your emotions should be in it. You just have to be mindful of like how far you swing each way, so you're not overcorrecting or overreacting. But the emotions are part of it for sure. And I think what you have to look at is the data does suggest like Patrick Mahomes from a clean pocket has thrown for the most yards and touchdowns this season. And by the way, he's had a clean pocket more often this season than any in the history of his game so far. So yeah, Andy Reid crafting an offense that the problem is when your emotions also say, hey, I remember my mind thinks about Patrick Mahomes scrambling, dropping back, doing horizontal throws that somehow make it to the end zone. But you have to remember that that's like once or twice a game for him. But, there's a lot of other throws in that game that are more higher probability throws.
We're talking to Cynthia Frelund, analytics expert for NFL Network. Toss her a follow on Twitter at @CFrelund. Cynthia, let's take a look at the NFC here, because the 49ers, to me, have the best defense remaining out of any team left. Now, the Eagles are up there too, so the NFC is really set up for a good defensive matchup here. But every week, the offense for the 49ers comes into question because you have Brock Purdy. And he always seems to put your mind at rest, though. And, my question to you is, can Brock Purdy win you a Super Bowl in his first NFL season? Like, is there data to back up at all that put the 49ers at this point, at this stage in the season, at a disadvantage or at an advantage for some reason, because Brock has continued to silence the skeptics?
It's funny because, you talked about that defense, and you're absolutely right. And like Fred Warner needs we need more. We need to talk about him more. But ultimately,
he's the best player. He's the best defensive player on that team. I don't think Bosa's great. I love the havoc, the splash. Give me Fred Warner and his versatility.
I mean, you saw him pick the ball off last week and stop every single run play. Like, it's amazing to be. I love that versatility. You're totally right. But stopping the run the way that the Niners have been able to, in fact, you can't run inside on them at all. And that's where Miles Sanders likes to run. You just can't. They're the best in the league, and it's not even close. That changes the cadence of the entire game and changes the opportunity for a guy like Brock Purdy. So when you're looking at Brock Purdy and what he's done, it's really like you talk about Andy Reid, you should talk about Kyle Shanahan here as well, and all of those weapons. I mean, the running backs, they have 3 of the top yards after contact and yards after catch guys in the entire league on one team. And they're the first team in NFL history with 5 players to average over 5 yards per rush every time they touch the ball, and they touched at least 40 times. This is a ridiculously stacked team. And then when you see things like last week, the Cowboys were a tricky defense to start for Brock Purdy. It didn't start off super pretty. But then what you saw Kyle Shanahan use the empty formations on almost a third of dropbacks. And what that did was, you can speak to this more than me even, those, when the wide receivers are out wide, you get a little tip off as to what the defense is trying to do against you. And that just made it easier for Brock Purdy. In those situations when they were in empty, his time to throw was a half a second shorter than when he wasn't using empty. So it was quick passes, it was designs and schemes, and that's pretty much just Kyle Shanahan's brain coming out in the form of a game, but also Brock Purdy being excellent at executing it.
Let me ask you something, Cynthia, kind of off topic, but I think you're the perfect person to ask because of data. I keep looking at, EPA and drop back and turnovers, and I'm looking at 2 quarterbacks that have been killed the last couple of days in the media, Dak Prescott and Josh Allen. And I look at their numbers side by side in QBR, and you could maybe say advantage Dak in terms of games played. Why do we view those 2 quarterbacks in such different lights?
Well, I mean, first off, if you can be the person to determine how a reaction to a Cowboys moment happens, that's it's going to be touchy, right? Whatever it is with the Cowboys, it's they're the best in the world, they're the worst in the world. It's so dramatic with them always, right? So that's the first part. But look, both Dak and Josh Allen had these monster expectations heading into the season. Josh Allen was the, odds-on favorite to be the league MVP prior to the season starting. And, everyone's like, well, Brian Daboll's now in, New York. What's going to happen with Ken Dorsey and blah, blah, blah. And, you got that splashy video of Ken Dorsey, beating the crap out of his Microsoft Surface tablet, when they were, whatever. So there was a lot of moments throughout the season where, you just saw these 2, and of course the quarterback always takes the majority of the responsibility, and both quarterbacks have committed too many turnovers, and there's just no 2 ways about it. The Bills' O-line isn't as good as maybe they thought ahead of the season, and Dak, he threw some uncharacteristic interceptions. Some weren't his fault, but some were confusing, and you just can't do that when you're in these high-profile situations.
Cynthia, I'll get you out of here on this. As we look maybe more future here than immediate. There's a lot of NFL coaching jobs open right now. Based on what you're seeing and what your models provide, who do you project will be the first team to make a hire?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think it's going to be the Denver Broncos. We saw yesterday. I have no idea, just so you know. This is tea leaves, like, because yesterday they finally said goodbye to the interim head coach.
Right.
That would lead me to believe that they're further along with their decision-making process than others. But that's not the job I would take. The best job, in my opinion, if you want to win football games, I think you should take the Panthers job then, because in reality, the NFC South is the one where you could potentially get some W's, whereas like the AFC West seems like a total nightmare.
Thank you, Cynthia. We appreciate your time, and hopefully we can talk again soon. Sorry for the mix-up.
Absolutely.
Hey,
Thank you so much.
We got it. We stayed at it. We're good.
Thank you.
We went deep into the football game, and we still won.
Oh,
We got
man.
it. Have a great
Appreciate
day,
you.
guys.
You
Thanks
too.
for having me.
For sure. That's Cynthia Frelund, again, analytics expert for NFL Network, and toss her a follow on Twitter. I'll say it again.
She's
at
fantastic.
C Frelund. Smart. Like,
yeah.
she is super, super smart.
All that being said, give me the Chiefs.
How about, too, her saying at the end that the Panthers, if you want to win right away.
But I said that to you, right? Remember when we kept talking about all the jobs? I said, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want the Panthers? They were everybody
climbing.
talks about the Colts. Give me the Panthers job.
And it's interesting, too, because
I certainly don't want Denver.
You look at what happened mid-season when Matt Rule was fired, and then all of a sudden they started to like pick up some ground toward the end. What are they missing? A quarterback? Like, are they a quarterback away, or is Sam Darnold the guy?
Maybe. And can I just say this about Coach Rule? And listen, I don't know the inner workings of what happened in Charlotte. I still have some really good buddies that work there in that market. A lot of people can put two and two together. And that was obviously the franchise that I first signed with. But the more I interact with Coach Rule, and the more I listen to things like, what did he say with Bussin' with the Boys when he said, "Hey, listen, I mean, you guys were 3-9 or 4-8 last year. Like, let me do my thing. Like, why do you care about what I'm doing?" The more I hear things like that, and I glean into his personality, I think, was the NFL ever a really good fit for what his strengths are?
No.
Okay, so it doesn't seem like it. So I don't know if the NFL should be in the topic of discussion when it comes to Matt Rule's success, because I just don't know if the NFL is built for a guy that is that, number one, confident in his own abilities, that is relational in terms of a developer,
player,
and kind of wants to do his own thing. I just don't think when I think about those things, like, that's not how an NFL works.
You talk about coaching, and especially in college basketball, like players driving the team. In college football, I would actually say it could be on the other end of how, like, a coach actually needs to insert his presence more because you're dealing with more personnel. Meanwhile, in the NFL, it's a different look because all of these guys have been there, done that. They know what it takes day in and day out. That's their job. Not to say college football isn't a job for these kids, because it is. It's treated like a job. If you went to college, you're either a student worker and you work at the local Wendy's, or if you're a player, you play football and, like, you go to practice 2-a-days. You go and have study halls with your teammates and things like that. I would almost say that it's more important to be a coach in college than it is to be a coach in the NFL. Now, maybe when it drawing up plays and things like that, that's different. But when we talk player relationships, that's why Matt Rule's strength fits in college.
It's interesting. This whole recruiting process it sharpened my prism on the ability to, I think, do my job better, because I have like real frame of references, and I can pit what I hear versus what I actually see on Saturdays and things like that. And I listen to, in the last handful of weeks and days, just yesterday, right? Colorado, Vanderbilt, Iowa, Minnesota, Oklahoma was the day before. And so I'm listening, and questions are being asked, and the recruiting process is going on. Nebraska sounds a lot closer to Minnesota and Iowa than they do, let's say, Colorado and Oklahoma, who, Venables is familiar with Oklahoma, but still only going to be in the second year of putting that program together. Colorado, the most vastly different of the bunch. And boy, he's fantastic, right? Former Shadron guy, and knows, I think, the area well. But listening to like the blueprints and kind of where programs are, I see why people are confident, why they want to drink the Kool-Aid with Coach Rule, because I'm telling you, he sounds a lot closer to, Rossi and Collins and Coach Fleck, Coach Wood, LeVar Woods, in terms of experience, and this is what we do, this is who we are, this is what we're projecting, than some programs that are kind of trying to still either turn the corner or just getting started, which is weird because he's only been here 2.5 months, but he has the experience that precedes him that you hear come through his staff. It's I'm blown away by some of these things that I've been hearing. It's just like, I mean, put it this way. I know why Kansas State wins. I know why they win. I hear why they win. And I pit what I hear versus what I see. And I'm like, and it's little stuff. It's little stuff. And I'm like, you know what? There's longevity in that.
We'll talk reset, rebuild next, but you said something there that sparked some interest in my brain, and I'm going to save that segment for tomorrow. And it's all about how you talked about how Coach Rule kind of has it all laid out, and some programs don't feel like they do. And it makes me think about what's going on in other coaches' minds when they talk to recruits. So we'll do that tomorrow, but reset, rebuild next.
Oh, when we have him. Hey, B, are you there?
Brian Edwards. Hello. I want to talk sports betting. I did not have a good day yesterday.
Fudge.
Those hockey games, man, all unders except for 1 over. 1 over yesterday.
I'm afraid to even show you. So I'm piggybacking on this, I think, Rule.
Brian? Brian, are you there? Brian? Okay, well, we'll just see when he gets in here. Are you there, Brian? Are you there now? There, you clicked in. Are you there
Can you
now?
hear me?
Yeah, I
Can
can hear you now.
Okay, great. All right, you can hear me fine?
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
Great. All right, so talk to you again in like 20 minutes. We're still going 8:45, right?
Yep, about 18 minutes.
All right, sounds good, bud.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian.
Hey, maybe send me a text to give me a heads up, just because I'm usually expecting your call and like working on some other stuff.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
you want to just stay logged in? What do you want to do?
Yeah, no, yeah. I'm gonna stay logged in, but I'm probably gonna have this page minimized. So send me a text when you're like ready for me to come in. Does that make sense?
Yep, we'll do that. Thanks,
All right,
Brian.
awesome. Thanks, bud. Bye.
Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Hey, back with you on Coffee and Cream in the Morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. 590 AM ESPN Omaha, 1480 ESPN Lincoln. We're live on TikTok right now for those of you joining us there. We're also live on Twitter and YouTube. And Travis, thanks for letting us know that you can hear everything. We actually knew that. We're just making sure we can test for our next guest in order that we can get Brian Edwards on. So,
Hey, Shane, real quick.
What's up?
I know we sometimes when we have to record and it goes out, why does that have to go out over the stream?
Well, because
it's because we're in StreamYard, right?
Yeah, and it's the way it's like through the board. It's going through the.
It's like that at the other place too.
Yeah, I mean, and he's got to be able to hear us, and we wanted to be able to hear him. And to do that, it needed to be simulated like we were on the air. And as we did that, we simulated like it was on the air, but we weren't. But it went over the stream.
Yeah, I got you.
So it worked.
And
they just get a little bit more of us in the stream during the commercial break.
Islands in the stream. That is what we are.
good song. I actually know that song. I know like maybe 3% of the songs.
Well, that's because it's old and Anglo, so you'd be good at that.
But Cynthia sounded pretty good, didn't she?
She did. She
like
sounded great.
audio wise, and maybe as we work through this, maybe this will be something that we do, moving forward.
One of my favorites in the high school coaching ranks. T texts me and he goes, "Can you imagine if we had had analytics in high school?" And in my head, I was like, "You'd be a kid in a candy store and you'd probably still be coaching." You think I can remember numbers and stats?
Try talking to this guy.
Ridiculous.
Hey, let's reset or maybe rebuild. Let's try and squash.
How about revisit?
Yeah, or revisit, right? We could revisit. Let's try to squash this take. So Trev Albert said yesterday that Matt Rule has far surpassed, his expectations in terms of work pace. I'm sure that expectation bar wasn't set low either. But then Matt Rule also came out and said that there's a difference from taking a program to some place they've never been. This is taking a program to where they have once been. I read into both of those quotes, and it makes me think, is it reset? Is it rebuild? How about can it be a little bit of both? So when you talk reset, the definition of reset, DB, set again or differently. Rebuild, build again after it has been damaged or destroyed. It's kind of a combination of the two. Like, I don't think it's one or the other. And that's why I said earlier on in the show, I'm Switzerland in this case. I'm a Quaker because I think it can rest on both sides.
You want peace? Have you heard OAR?
Yes.
I want peace.
Okay. You know, there's a sense of legacy, though, when Matt Rule comes to this program and knows that even when the program hits adversity, if you turn it around, like, you are going to be the guy that is remembered forever.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm a little bit of a cheat code just because I think I know how the coaches think. And I remember even Coach Frost telling me this. And he was honest. He said, you know, we can turn this around quickly, but I would have to catch lightning in a bottle. We would have to catch a few breaks, and I would have to hit on a few things. But if we want to sustain it, it's going to take time. I thought that was interesting, and in some pretty good self-evaluation. I've also heard Coach Rule intimate and almost say, hey, listen, sure, we may be able to hit the ground running. We might. But if you want long-term sustainability, how many different ways can he say the way that he built the contract, how he likes to work, the slow burn versus the expectation level, what last year meant to his first year with this staff? He's telling you 19,000 different ways. They may win next year, but it's not going to be indicative either way of the trajectory of the program. I think he's saying that because I think any coach worth his salt or her salt will tell you you can turn something around in a year, but you won't know about long-term sustainability for at least 3. So I just think that's the safe way to play it. Now, the discussion is interesting because Samir and I used to talk about this all the time, and we would go back and forth. And the reason I like talking with him about it is because he's on both sides before. So sometimes I would say we talk about returning productivity. He's big into that, especially along the O-line, D-line. He loves analytics, right? And so we would get into this about experience, and then when it works, that's good experience coming back. When it doesn't work, or potentially if a team hasn't been good, it's, well, do you want those guys back anyway? Right? Because it could go either way. Hey, you can assume they're going to get better, or, those guys weren't very good. Let's clean house anyway. Right? So we've gone back and forth with multiple case studies, right? College, pro, right? So with this particular case, I think it's fascinating when people really get passionate about, well, it's disrespectful, because if I was a player and folks are telling me it's a reset, I don't really want to hear that, right? I'm probably pretty good. But the reality of it is, hey, listen, man, if we're 4-8 or we're 3-9, or, hey, man, we got to get better.
Right.
Because one of my lines that I like to say is, well, we haven't won with you.
And
right?
and we
and I think
if we can win without you.
And players need to understand that. Well, we haven't won with you. So yeah, I'm going to coach my way into having options, which is what I think I hear Coach Rule saying when he says things like, I mean, with all due respect, you guys were 4-8 last year. Like, how are you going to tell me who I should hire and who I shouldn't? You guys were 4-8 last year. How are you going to tell me? Why are you worried about my process? Like, clearly I'm here for a reason. The beauty of what he's been able to do so far is he's balanced being approachable and not know-it-all-ish with having conviction in his craft. He's way smart when it comes to that. He's very engaging. He'll listen, right? He'll talk.
Right.
Doesn't mean he's taking it with him. right? And I think the blend of that is what's endeared him, at least early on. This is without playing a snap, endeared him early on to the fan base because he seems engaging and receptive. All the while, he's smart enough. He's a very good orator. He's smart enough to know he's still setting his own boundaries. All healthy relationships have boundaries. They do. Parent to child, coach to player, everybody has to operate within boundaries. And when those boundaries are infringed upon, you can get chaos. Very crafty. He's setting boundaries.
At the end of the day, what do you want from this program? You want to see results.
Haven't we said the last couple of years, Judon, we want it to look like football?
We want it to look like football, exactly. So that's why I'm kind of on the fence between both, because for one, like, I'm not knocking any players here, but when people talk about rebuild, that's not saying, hey, go, we're going to kick you to the curb. That's saying, hey, this program has been in shambles for years now.
Mm-hmm.
We need to rebuild the program so that we can get back to the level and get back to the so-called stature that you want to be at. Meanwhile, you have to reset at the same time. You have to change things up. You mentioned 3-9, 4-8. You have to do something different.
No question.
In order to achieve the success or the goal that you set forth. And so between both of those things, it's not saying like, hey, Casey Thompson, you were a bad quarterback last year for this team. We can't win with you. We're going to go a different direction. It's, hey, what wasn't working? Let's address those issues, and then let's see if we can get there together. It's not a knock on anybody. It's not. You don't have to stand up for players in either side of this argument. You don't have to stand up for the program in either side of this argument. But what you need to do is address the issue. Let's stop beating around the bush. Let's just get there. And that's kind of Matt Rule's mind.
Yeah.
It's, hey, we're getting there. And whether you like it or not, we're going to get there. And so we may make friends, we may make enemies. But in both of those, in that fork in the road, it's going to come back together in the end.
Yeah, that is fantastic because I'm pitting it against, again, what I hear, recruiting, right? I heard a coach the other day say, hey, listen, I'm not just going to offer you on the phone. We're going to offer you. Come see us so you can look me in the eye and do it face to face. I know why that program runs. Conversely, I just heard a program yesterday say, I'm not even sure what we're going to do coverage-wise yet. We haven't spent much time together as a staff.
Let's talk about that tomorrow.
What?
But we're going to talk to Brian Edwards next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
As we wind this thing down on Coffee and Cream in the Morning on Hail Varsity Radio, we'd like to thank you for joining us the entirety of the show. 1480 ESPN Lincoln, 590 AM ESPN Omaha. We're live on Twitter and YouTube, and we're also live from the H&H Chevrolet stage at Hail Varsity Club. As we changed a lot of different directions today, you could probably guess that it was more of like a four-car pileup on the road because we went all over the place. But you know what? If any instance, any situation comes about like that, you should take your car to Dingman's. Dingman's Collision Center is your one-stop shop for all your car needs. They've been in the business for over 25 years here in Omaha. They're family-run, family-owned, and family operated. Invest in the latest technology to stay up to date with the ever-evolving technology of what cars are. They work on all makes and models from Fords to Teslas. 4 locations throughout the metro area, along with that standalone mechanical shop at 120th and Maple. Bring your car there. Also give to charity because they have the Give Back program. They've been up for 18 years running, so something's working over at Dingman's. Go to dingmans.com to learn more. At this time, let's head on over to Vegas and talk to our guy, Brian Edwards, who's on with us every Thursday to end the show. Brian, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. What's happening?
B, you sound fantastic, man. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. The Bengals treated me right last weekend, as did the Niners, as I continued to bet both of them for like I've done every week for the last 2 months.
Hey, Brian, you and DB made me some money over the weekend in NFL, so thank you for that.
Well, it was a sweat with the Niners, that's for sure. Dallas's defense played great, but man, Cincy, when Jamar Chase was so wide open on that first drive, I was like, wow, is it going to be this easy? I didn't think it would be, but wow, it ended up being easy.
B, have you kind of reconciled in your mind why Dak Prescott gets so much criticism and Josh Allen gets so many excuses?
Right? That is a great point. That is an absolute.
I mean, they have this almost the same numbers. Dak may have even a little better QBR.
Yeah, and Dak had more points last week.
It's like
not by much, but just a couple.
It's amazing. Like so as much, and Kellen Moore's like getting interviews, and Dorsey's like, "Hey, we're good." Like, really?
Right. I wouldn't have been surprised, and maybe they still will, if McDermott makes a move away from Dorsey, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Cowboys did the same with Moore. But yeah, I saw that on the ticker. Was that yesterday, or the day before?
Yeah, Moore's interviewing in Carolina.
Yeah, that's what I saw on the ticker. I guess yesterday or maybe the day before. And I was like, huh? He's about to get fired in Dallas.
Pretty crazy. Nonetheless.
Wild.
Pretty crazy. Hey, let's start with Bengals and Eagles here, because those are the two plays that you like for this weekend. When you look at the Bengals, you like the situation of them being on the road, and then with the Eagles, you like them at home, which is kind of weird because you move away from your 49ers in that game. Why do you like the Eagles? Why do you like the Bengals?
Well, I would be on the Bengals whether Mahomes was healthy or not. And I mean, I kind of wish he was healthy because we'd be getting some points. But you know, I think I've backed the Bengals every game during this 10-game winning streak where they're 8-1-1 against the spread, but they're 10-0 against the spread for me. I bet them -6.5 on the Monday before the playoff game against Baltimore. They won by 7, and a regular season finale, which is the push on the 8-1-1 because the line moved to 11. I was in at 7, you know, before they gave Huntley the week off and went to Anthony Brown, talking about the Ravens in the regular season finale. So I've backed them successfully 10 times in a row. He's 3-0 against Mahomes and the Chiefs. I know all 3 games were very, very close. You know, I guess you could say could have gone either way games, but Burrow made fewer mistakes. I mean, the AFC Championship game, you know, Mahomes and Andy Reid both made that critical mistake when they had a play with like 5 or 6 seconds left before halftime where they're, you know, on like the 2-yard line, could have had the field goal. And they did a play where I think it was a dump off to Clyde Edwards-Helaire and he didn't get out of bounds or scored the touchdown. That cost them 3. That was huge. Yeah, I'm sticking with the Bengals. I think they're the best team in the NFL. I've been saying it for months now. The 3 offensive linemen out was a cause for concern, but then they dominated the line of scrimmage and ran the ball effectively last week. So, yeah, I like the Bengals went outright.
Let's talk. This is crazy. This is how you know you cap Merrimack.
I was thinking the same thing.
Who's going to take, but he always finds these games. That's why I trust you, B. Central Connecticut, you've got some trends with Merrimack as they're on the road against 5-16 Central Connecticut. You don't think there's going to be a ton of points. But how in the world is Central Connecticut favored?
David, I'm not looking at the side or worried about the side, brother. So I'm doing my new basketball pod for Vegas Insider. And so like 3 weeks ago, I was looking up, you know, the best over teams, the best under teams. And I saw Merrimack only had 1 over all year. So I started looking at their numbers and they were playing that night. So I took their under and it hit again and it went on. Now I've only been on like 4 or 5 of them, but at the time they were on a 16-0 run to the under. They played on MLK Day, so 2 Mondays ago, and that I didn't even notice they were on the board that day, and I think it was like an afternoon game, and it went over, but I wasn't on it. And so they came back last Sunday. I took the under, and it's on a 17-1 run. I'm not as bullish on it tonight because this is their second lowest total of the year at 118, but I'm still going to take it. Like I said, it's 17-1 last 18. And I won't bore your listeners all the details, but in short, basically all of their last 12 games, or 11 of their last 12, have had 119 or less. So even though it's a low total, that's what they do.
That has to be one of the lower totals too, in
sure,
in response to all of college basketball.
That's some Northeastern type totals right there. They play a lot of low scoring games.
I feel like Air Force used to have some totals in the like 108 to 112 range, you know, 5 or 6 years back. But yeah, not many totals in the 1 teens these days.
Right. As you look at college hoops on Saturday, a team that has been piquing my interest as of late is Kansas, and the situation that they've been in over the last 3 games, really unable to get things going, find any sort of momentum. They're at Kentucky, another team that had high expectations this year, but have since trickled off. It's kind of a get-right position for both teams. But what do you like in that matchup?
Well, it'll be interesting to see the line. I'm going to guess Kentucky is going to be about a 2 or a 3 point favorite. They've really righted the ship. And now look, I know Kansas has lost 3 in a row, but look, they've been struggling longer than 3 games. Prior to the 3-game losing streak, they had won 4 of 5, but they had won 5 in a row, but 4 of the 5 wins had been by 11 combined points. So they were just squeaking by. Probably should have lost at home to both Iowa State and Oklahoma, and found a way to win by 3 in Lubbock. Only beat Oklahoma State at home by 2. So I mean, they're in a 2-7 ATS slump, and Kentucky is finally gotten right. It started with the game at Tennessee. And then they trailed by 8 at halftime to Georgia, but it ended up covering and winning by 14. A&M is on a roll. We saw what they did at Auburn last night. Kentucky rallies and beats them. And then they go into Vandy and win convincingly a couple of nights ago. So I think Kentucky's got to be the favorite, winning 4 in a row, both straight up and against the spread. And, if Kentucky is 3 or fewer, I would lean their way. I'm not saying for sure I'll take it. There's a big menu of games on Saturday.
Hey, so when you look at Tennessee, metrics like them, do you?
Well, I have a hard time getting that Kentucky game out of my head, and it reminded me of that round of 32 game they had against Michigan last year when I was on them big. And that Kentucky game they were losing, I kept betting them live where I only had them, pick them and like -2, and the rally never happens. Sometimes they struggle to get buckets, but man, their defense is so good. And since that Kentucky game, they've responded and dealt out 3 pimp slaps. And last night, beat Georgia by 29. Georgia had not lost by more than 14 all year long. So, but I still don't know that I trust Tennessee laying big numbers against elite teams. Georgia, LSU, and Mississippi State, the last 3 games since Kentucky are not elite teams. So I guess I'm kind of hedging with you there, Damon. I don't necessarily trust them against big-time teams. Is Texas a big-time team that they get Saturday? I don't know. Is Texas a big-time team?
Carr's been big time. I know that. Let me get you out of here. Let me get you out of here on this beat. How hard has the Big 12 been for you to cap, considering there are so many quality teams with similar metrics?
Man, it's been good to me because I've been riding K-State so much. And yeah, everybody in the Big 12 is good. There are definitely no easy wins. That's for sure. I mean, everybody is Ken Palm top 70, and that's Texas Tech at 70, and Oklahoma's slumping bad, and they're at 52, but everybody else is top 38. So it's a great league. My Gators, unfortunately, have the misfortune of going to K-State on Saturday to face their old teammate, Keontae Johnson. I guess it's a great opportunity. Florida's playing a little better. I don't think they're on K-State's level, though.
Brian, we appreciate it, man. Thanks so much. We'll talk again next week.
All right, fellas, y'all have a great weekend. Enjoy the NFL games.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you. You as well. And we hope all of you out there enjoy it too. We had a jam-packed show. We'll get to our poll results on Morning Dump next. We'll also talk a little Major League Baseball, start with the Hall of Fame there, and then maybe creep into some other sports and how the baseline and benchmarks may not be the same everywhere you go. So that's what you'll get in Morning Dump. But we thank you for joining us on Coffee and Cream, and we'll see you tomorrow.